Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. I'm Orcun Cetin. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Kent University, and this is a work that I have done while I was in Delft University of Technology. In this work, we try to measure ISP and consumer efforts to remove Mirai infections. And it's a joint work with Yokohama University and NICT in Japan. So let's take a look at the other slide. We all seen the devastation caused by Mirai infections through these headlines. Mirai took down crabs on security and attacked many other organizations and businesses. And there was quite a big mess after that. And it got us thinking, how can we clean this mess? There are plenty of vulnerable IoT devices for any kind of IoT botnet to take down. And then they can use it for any kind of malicious purposes if they seem fit. Usually this is DDoS. And we try to figure out, first of all, where those infected IoT devices are located. What we did was we needed some IP addresses of those infected IoT devices. And then we look for some sort of darknet data where we can monitor those malicious IP addresses. We got a darknet data, and that darknet data had around 300,000 IP addresses to monitor any kind of attacks coming, from Mirai-infected devices. And this data was, I think we started collecting around January 2016 to April 2018. And then we got plenty of IP addresses, and we mapped those IP addresses to ASN numbers, and then based on the ASN numbers, we classified the networks. What happened was, like, majority of those infected IoT devices, they were in ISP broadband networks, not very surprising. And then only 1% was in hosting, educational, and governmental networks. Then we identify critical challenges to deal with this problem. First of all, let's say you know that there's an infected IoT device on this IP address. You want to contact the owner of this IP address, or you want to actually contact the device owner, but there's no public information on that. As a result of this, there's no communication channel to reach that person as well. And lastly, what are you going to say to them? I mean, IoT devices, they're not very well-known term in the community. People, they don't know how to clean up their routers. They don't know how to clean up their DVRs. It was quite a bit of a hard challenge for us. We noticed that since majority of these devices, they're in IoT networks, ISP networks, what happens is, like, ISPs can identify and notify those infected IoT device owners, and device owners can clean up those devices. But how effective this would be? So we made 2 studies on mid-size European ISPs network. Before us, ISP was trying to notify these people, people with Mirai-infected devices, and they were notifying them through walled garden notifications. I'll explain walled garden in a second. And they use a notification content which was quite complicated to act upon. They use very technical terms, and their cleanup action wasn't so actionable. As a result of this, this was our observational study, basically. And then we decided to change the content. We improved the content with a Neve content, and then we add, like, really actionable remediation method. What else we did? We get rid of all these technical terms. We make it very simple for people to understand, and then we start using this notification content. And we did our randomized control experiment with that content. In total, in both of these studies, we had like 220 customers of that ISP. So let's take a look at the randomized control experiment. First of all, in that experiment, we had two type of notifications. One of them is email notification. Basically, we use that same content, and then we send device owners an email explaining them that there's an IoT device in their network causing up trouble. This is how you clean up. And there's this wall garden. There's another type of notification, which happens to be a wall garden notification. And in that notification, what happens is we place the people in a control environment where we cut their internet and redirect all traffic to something called landing page. In that landing page, we show them the notification and try to explain the problem there. So imagine you try to, when you're in a that kind of a control environment, when you try to go to Facebook, for instance, or other website, what happens is like you go to a landing page, and landing page try to explain you the problem, and then give you some sort of remediation steps. In the bottom of that, we had some sort of a link to leave that environment so that you can turn back to browsing internet. And there was another link to communicate with the ISP, basically. You can explain the problem, you can explain what you did, basically. In order to detect those Mirai-infected devices, we use shadow service drone feed and IoT honeypot that we deploy. We deploy that IoT honeypot around, I think, 600 IP addresses. And then once we identify a Mirai-infected IP address in that network, we find the customer, and then we try to find out whether this person was notified before or not. If it's notified, we discard that. If it's not notified, what we did was we randomly assigned them to either one of these three groups. First group is a control group, basically, and in that group, we don't do anything. We just observe the natural remediation rates. And then the second one is an email group, like I explained. Third one is wall garden, and then we track the infections. After we do any intervention, we try to understand how effective this is by tracking those infections in darknet data that we use, 300,000 IP addresses, and a kind of scans can be seen there, shadow server drone feeds, and IoT honeypot that we deployed. So let's take a look at the results of our notification study, impact of the notification. So what happens is like, in here you happen to see a survival graph. In that survival graph, any kind of drop represents a cleanup. So as you can see, if it's closer to the bottom, they're doing much better. And improved wall garden notifications, they managed to clean up 92% in that group. We manage 92% cleanup. And then this followed by standard wall garden notification, which happens to be 88% remediation. And then control and email, they achieve around 70%. And we noticed that sending email has no observable impact compared to doing nothing, control group, basically. You can see that in previous slide, there is a quite high natural remediation rate. And then we ask ourselves, is it similar in other networks? So ISP had this other two networks. One of them is a business network, and the other one is a cheap subsidiary. They pay less, so they don't receive notifications. And the business market, they don't also receive wall garden notifications or email notifications because this could be quite disruptive to their businesses. So since ISP didn't notify those networks, we decided to compare our control group with them, and we see that natural remediation was also visible there. We also realized that in business, infections live longer. That might be because of some sort of business continuity reasons, because those devices might be getting less reboot. Then we take a look at 4 random ISPs in the same country. We try to figure out whether, natural remediations, is it happening in there too? And then we noticed that indeed, it was very visible. Natural remediation was very visible in those other 4 ISPs in the same country. Then what we did was we tried to figure out, is it somehow this natural remediation related to device type? And then we made our scans to do attacking IP addresses and tried to figure out what kind of devices they were. And what we noticed is this is a very difficult job, first of all, and we couldn't really identify many. We identified some cameras, DVRs, wall gardens, as you can see, NAS systems, printers, routers. But we couldn't really identify a lot of devices. And then we tried to figure out, we put them in a survival curve, as you can see, and tried to see like which one of these devices clean up faster. And we noticed that routers are actually clean up faster than DVRs and cameras. So user experience. What happened was we asked ISP, can we somehow talk to people that we notified? They said yes, but they didn't really allow us to talk to people that we didn't notify because they didn't want to interrupt their lives. Once we called them, what happened was 44% of the participants, they said, okay, we can join the interview. Some people even they said they don't want it to. Some people think that that was a Microsoft scam, which was interesting. Nonetheless, we had some participants. So all these people, as you can see, they receive notifications. And what we noticed is like 50% of the email group, they remember receiving the notification. Only 50%. Then we ask them, we ask every single one of them, is it correct, we send your notification to this email address. Is this your email address? Are you actively controlling this? And every single one of them, they said yes. And as a result of this, it got us thinking. We thought that it might be because spam filters or some other protective measures that notifications didn't go through. You can also see that email notifications, 12% of the people, they didn't trust them. And even in walled garden notifications, like 14% in the standard walled garden notifications, they didn't trust the notification. But when we improve the content and use walled garden, everybody trusts the notifications. So what else I can say? Let me go to the next slide. Communication logs. There were 3 ways to communicate with an ISP. One of them is an email to an abuse desk. The other one is help desk communication through phone. You can phone the help desk. And then the contact form of the walled garden. So we noticed that only 7% of the email group contacted help desk. Basically, they phoned them up. This number was much higher in both walled garden notifications. And what else we noticed is that also people who's been notified with walled garden, they choose to contact the ISP more often. As a result of this, we thought that lower or higher rate of seeking help is related to cleanup actions or action. Communication logs. We try to find out the themes. We try to find out what those people talked about, basically. And then we noticed that some people, actually 30% in both walled garden notifications and 17% in email notifications run virus scanners in their PCs. And they hope that, actually, IoT malware would go away with this approach. Obviously, that was a very wrong model of cleaning up an IoT device because, come on. And even though we didn't really mention anything about running a virus scanner, they actually used it. Identifying an IoT device, many people in walled garden notifications, they did that. They tried to identify which device of theirs is infected. And only 20% of walled garden, improved walled garden group seek for help, while this rate was much higher, 40%, in walled garden standard notifications. As you can understand, when you improve the notification, what happens is basically people seek less help. 10% of the walled garden notifications, both of them, they said, well, we're sorry, we can't deal with this problem, just send us a paid technician. And lastly, about the complaints, obviously, when you put these people in a walled garden environment, it's an environment where everything is just shut off. You don't use your internet. A lot of people complain, and not a lot of, some people complained, and these complaints, we see that in standard walled garden notifications, it was much higher than improved walled garden notifications. So when you communicate the message properly, you get less complaints. We got a little bit more cleanup, but most important thing is that we got less complaints and people seek less help. So conclusions, we noticed that improved walled garden notifications indeed clean up much better than others. Standard walled garden notifications, email notifications, and a control group, obviously. And we noticed that sending email has no observable impact about natural remediation. Meaning is like, in our study, doing nothing and sending an email notification was almost the same thing. We didn't achieve much cleanup by sending email notices. We noticed that there was quite a high rate of natural remediation in different ISPs, in different networks. Also, we noticed that improving the content reduces the complaints, but nonetheless, small but vocal minority that was angry or frustrated, basically they complained. We believe that in future, more and more people will adopt this technology, and we will see walled gardens more often with new IoT threats or new malware threats. This is going to be more accepted. This is going to be more expected from ISPs. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Hi, Ben Stock from CISPA. Thanks for the talk. One question looking to the future. HTTPS everywhere. How do you do walled garden notification? So how can you intercept the HTTP traffic if it's HTTPS? Any thoughts?
Well, you put them in a completely different environment. Therefore, you can organize anything and everything.
But still, I'm typing facebook.com. That is HTTPS.
Uh-huh.
And you should not be able to get a certificate for facebook.com as the ISP.
Well, we redirect everything coming from user traffic to a landing page. So you don't even go to Facebook.
But I'm typing Facebook, the domain, into my browser. So even if you redirect the DNS traffic, there's still going to be an attempt of my browser to connect to some server where it asks for the certificate for facebook.com, which you cannot have.
ISP had a system implemented for this. And what happened was, like, infected customers, they put into a completely different network. This is like configured in a way that you wouldn't reach anywhere but the landing page.
Okay, but you have to visit some HTTP site because HTTPS should not work unless I'm making a gigantic mistake.
Well, we didn't see any problem with we didn't see any kind of problems like that.
Okay, thanks.
Any kind of other services like gaming services, Skype, they were also disconnected as well. Just so you know.
Hi, nice talk. So you say that it's a consumer effort towards removing Mirai malware. So how do you ensure that the analyzed endpoints were actually scanned by Mirai?
There is so if I understand properly, you're asking us how did we detect infections?
No. I'm asking how can you be sure that the IP addresses that you analyze were actually infected by Mirai and not by any other malware?
Okay, there is a specific signature of Mirai. It was in understanding the Mirai paper from Usenix, and we use the same methodology for darknet, for instance.
Okay, the other question, so you mentioned that you were only able to label few IP addresses with their corresponding devices. Mm-hmm. So what was the representation of those IP addresses in the entire sample space?
Representation of?
How many IP addresses were you able to label devices with?
Oh, okay. It was different across networks, and I'm assuming it was around, I can't remember the exact number, it was in the paper. I think it's around 20% or something.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think that's all.